Hi, thanks for joining us for this new episode of the Financial Literacy series of the JA Malta podcast. I'll start off as usual by thanking our kind sponsors and partners, Finance Malta, who's supporting us with this series today. And we have two new guests, Patrick and Roberta. And today we will be discussing the topic of greening your investment. So we'll be attaching financial literacy with different types of investments, especially those that are more related to the circular finance, circular economy, and green. So let's start off. Patrick, Roberta, I'll ask you to introduce yourself to the audience. Roberta.
So my name is Roberta Lepre. I'm a lawyer by profession. I come originally from the non-profit world. My interest is primarily in social issues and human rights issues, and for the last few years I have now been working with businesses to help them implement their ESG programs, devise and implement their ESG programs. And for the benefit of those who may be not familiar with the term, we're looking at the environmental, social and governance criteria that can help businesses become more ethical but also more innovative and more efficient. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Roberta. Patrick?
Nice. So I'm a full-time financial coach and lecturer. I am an accountant by profession, believe it or not. And I spent most of my life working in business advisory, in investment management, and also in private equity. And it was last year and a half ago, that I decided that I wanted to make a true impact on regular people, let's call them that, to help them manage their finances and educate them on their potential money management. I also give financial well-being talks and seminars to businesses, and that's me in a nutshell.
Excellent. So if you're familiar with the way we kick off the podcast, we'd like to break the ice with some quick questions. So I'll ask you to choose between certain options. So would you go for budget-friendly or eco-friendly?
Eco-friendly.
Oh my God, I'm an accountant, budget.
Reusable bags or the compostable packaging?
Reusable.
Decompostable. We're not agreeing.
It's good to have diversity.
True.
Would you get information from financial news or more podcasts?
Podcast?
Pass. Podcast, fine.
Do you grow your own food or buy from the farmer's market?
Buy from the farmers.
I'm very keen on growing my own food. It's been on my to-do list for a very long time. I haven't got down to it, I have to be honest.
Mine dies before it grows, so that's the problem. Recycling or upcycling?
Upcycling.
Upcycling, we agree on that.
At least a lawyer and accountant agree on that thing.
And spend money on experiences or save them for a rainy day?
Experiences.
Definitely experience.
Thanks for that. So that kicks us off now to start the discussion a bit about circular finance. So just if I had to put a bit of an introduction, circular finance are obviously financial instruments that support the use or the development, the implementation of the circular economy. But Robert, if I could start from you, could you give us a bit of an introduction? So let's iron out some details. What is circular economy and circular finance? Sort of how do they link together?
I think maybe coming from someone who's not an expert in finance, I can best describe it as going back to the thinking of our grandparents, where nothing got wasted. No, we used everything and reused everything as for as long as we could. And I think that's what the circular economy is. It's actually being efficient with whether it's energy that comes into the production of goods or services, and also the raw materials, so making the best use of the raw materials, reusing raw materials, maybe even from other products, and ultimately being more efficient. So I think it's very clear that this kind of thinking has a positive impact on the environment, but also it can have a very good positive impact on our pockets as well, because we're making the best use of resources. That's my understanding of the circular economy. And when it comes to circular finance, it's investing in projects, in initiatives which follow these principles. So rather than just looking at the bottom line, which is obviously important when it comes to finance and investment, but perhaps taking a more long-term view as to when we expect to see a return from our investment. So I think that would be the major difference between the traditional financial products and the more sustainable or circular financial products, that the expectation of the return takes more of a long-term view.
Yes, Roberta. So when we're talking about the circular finance, this could be obviously part of the implementation of your ESG principles,
yes.
Supporting the E of the ESG. Do you see businesses looking into this when they look for financing? Is it something part of their strategies, or we haven't seen any activity on that front?
No, I believe there has definitely been a shift, especially post-pandemic. So I started doing this work just before the pandemic, and I must say it was a tough ride. Companies weren't yet, I think, ready to accept ESG principles, whereas after the pandemic, I don't know if it was a result of the pandemic or other external factors, I have definitely noticed a massive shift. For different reasons. Perhaps people were realizing that they could do business in a better way. I believe that regulation has also helped in terms of starting to change the mindsets. Also, banks and financial institutions, they are helping clients, businesses to understand and appreciate ESG, because banks themselves want to direct their capital towards projects that have a better impact. And I think also from the consumer point of view, we have started seeing a growing awareness. Yes.
Excellent.
So different drivers, different reasons.
Thank you. Patrick, being a financial advisor, I'll ask you more on the front from the advisor or the investor perspective. What do you see are the main differences from traditional finance to the circular finance, sustainable finance, from an investor point of view? How is the investor affected with it?
Yeah, so there is data, empirical evidence suggesting that from a return perspective, especially if we take a long-run view, that returns on equity investments, so shares or stocks as they're known, in certain companies that practice these sustainability practices, they're actually higher over a long period of time than others. There is one outlier, though, in the fact that the company that generated most returns in the world ever is actually a tobacco company. But that is just one outlier. That's a fun fact. So in my view, before we look into the sustainability practices and ESG initiatives of a certain company, we need to look at the investor themselves. So what is an investment? What are the main concepts in investing? What is a bond? What is a share? And solidify first our investing knowledge, because I think there is a massive lacuna in the market. There are massive knowledge gaps. So, for example, our financial knowledge in Malta is much lower than the OECD plus average. Only 1 in 5 people understand what the time value of money is. So in my view, before we start understanding ESG and that component of investing, first we need to understand what the benefits of investing are. And the benefits of investing are compounding over a very long run, and let's call it getting rich slow. Now, when it comes to companies that do invest in sustainability practices, let's call it that, there is another element of get rich slow. There is a longer term horizon, yes, but it's also possible to generate returns and to make the world a better place.
But when, from an investor point of view, if let's say I have my knowledge, be it limited or maybe more advanced, and I'm comparing something more on the traditional front and as opposed to something which is more I don't know, something like a green bond. So let's pick on that actually. What's the difference between a bond and a green bond?
Exactly. Okay, so a typical bond is an instrument which a company borrows from the general public for a number of years, say 10 years, and the general public would receive a rate of interest. It's a normal loan. A green bond is a bond, without going into much technical detail, it's a bond that satisfies certain criteria on environmental aspects, on social aspects, on governance aspects that are more elevated than the typical bond. What has happened? We have had one issuer in the green bond market in Malta. It hasn't been a private sector issuer. It's been a public sector. This was a couple of years ago already.
Yeah.
And it is sad to see that the take-up has been quite low. I mean, we have 124 at the moment bond issues in Malta, and only one is a green bond. And that takes me back to, actually, let's go back to first principles. What's the benefit of a bond? What's the benefit of an equity? And then we can discuss how and why a green bond is more beneficial to our own investments.
And Roberta, from as someone who has been pushing for ESG principles to be adopted and helps, could you see anything done from a governmental point of view, from a policy point of view, to incentivize companies to, when they're issuing a bond, classify or up their game, let's say, with ESG to qualify as a green bond? Is there something we can specifically do, or it's a matter of time?
Yes, but latching on to also what Patrick has been saying, so what can be done, not necessarily by the government, because we don't always have to look towards the government for something that needs to be done. I think it's primarily an issue of education. So you have many people online and offline, for instance, complaining about environmental degradation and the impact of construction in the country. But then, as soon as a regular bond is issued, which is often linked to a construction project, it's taken up within, I'm not going to say minutes, but very quickly, no? So I suspect that people are not realizing that there is a link between their choice of investment and broader environmental and social impact. So I really think it needs to start with education.
So when I want to do something good for the environment, I'll maybe look at my practices of, I don't know, recycling or the way I handle my waste. But then kind of when I'm investing, my brain switches off and I just focus on the money.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And I think we also need to work with our financial advisors, because they are the multipliers, no? They are the ones that can educate and direct the public towards better choices at the end of the day. So going back to your question, definitely education. And then I also believe in taxation to incentivize. So perhaps we can incentivize certain choices over others. Maybe we're not yet at the stage where we start penalizing, let's say, the negative choices, but perhaps we need to be looking towards getting there eventually. I also believe in a staggered approach. So maybe we can start by incentivizing choices which are better.
Yeah.
So perhaps greener choices, greener investments
could
benefit from better taxation rates.
And Patrick, sort of, you mentioned there was only one green bond that we could say, we could talk about. It was from the public sector. Why is there this lack from the private sector? Is it because the market is not interested in them? If, let's say, a well-established company issues a green bond or changes its, let's say, its mindset or its approach towards financing, will it get backlash from investors because they think that means less income? So what's the attitude towards them? Is it investors are not investing in them because they're not there, or the companies are not moving that direction because they know there's not a market for them?
This takes me back to the meetings I used to sit in with brokers and bond issuers and their advisors, and the discussion, unfortunately, always used to center on one number. and that one number was the coupon. So if something affects the coupon, then there'll be interest. If it affects other areas, like, I don't know, callability, for example, people then would switch off and would not understand. In my view, it is very market-driven, very investor-driven. And I find that it's almost as if there's a situation of indifference, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if we have these polluting bonds, for want of a better word, that are oversubscribed in minutes, why should a company be incentivized or issue a green bond? And where is the link with the general public? I don't think there is still that resonance already with the general public to make that link, because the general public, in my view, and this is our fault as a nation, as a society, as stakeholders, I believe there is a massive gap in investing knowledge, but people don't differentiate the different components of a bond, in my experience. So they just see the headline coupon, they see maybe the brand name, and they don't see the security, don't see the yields to maturity, callability, and many other factors that make a bond complex, let alone the different criteria of a green bond. That why should a company bother if, issuing a regular, more lightly regulated bond?
So, and this brings me to another question I was curious about. So for me to get the certification of a green bond, are there additional hurdles I need to go through? Who certifies it as a green bond? So could it be the case that companies are adopting green principles and ESG related principles, but they're not bothering to get the certification of a green bond? Because as you said, it's not like there's the investors are choosing that as opposed to the other. Is it a matter of we're doing the right things, but we don't need the certificate? It's like me doing a course that's not accredited. I don't care about the accreditation as long as I learned. Is that what's happening with investments? Are people doing the right things, just not getting the tick box? Or we're still doing bad practices?
I think it's all of the above.
Maybe.
And, yes, it's probably a mix, but heavier skewed towards, I don't think our practices are there yet to warrant the issuance of green bonds, firstly. And Roberta, you're the expert here.
No, but earlier you also mentioned it's very market driven. So again, for instance, an issuer might not feel they require the label because the market is not yet expecting it. However, I think there's an aspect of future readiness that we are not factoring in. So going forward, research is showing that the consumer, the investor, will start factoring in these criteria. There is an international study called the Edelman Trust Barometer, where we're seeing that globally, the majority of investors are looking at ESG criteria when it comes to their investment choices. And generally what happens in Malta, these trends eventually will follow those trends as well. So I think we also need to prepare as well for the expectations of the market. Maybe not at this point in time, but going forward.
And in fact, I mean, we can see it with youth and the Generation
Exactly.
Z and whatever. They're more conscious about climate change, about the environment. But the question is, do they also link this to investment then? Or is it just, as we were discussing, sort of, I'm environmentally friendly in my way of life, maybe, but then when it comes to purchasing decisions or investing decisions, then kind of I go back to normal. For example, even a simple, I'm buying a house. Are people looking at the environmental rating and house and getting a loan for a house? Or if it's a house I like,
Probably not the majority, but I think what's important here is that the environmental or ESG aspect doesn't go against the purely monetary financial aspect. So we're seeing that project investment that are aligned with the ESG criteria also eventually generate a better return, no? So it's not a matter of either or. And I want to mention here that from a risk point of view, products that don't align with the ESG expectations can face certain risks, which can be, for example, taxation that we're not envisaging going forward. So that's where the direct link as well between doing good and doing well comes in.
Because at the moment, yes, we do have that concept that it's kind of for something to be environmentally friendly, it has to be more expensive or maybe at a cost of my return. Is that so, Patrick?
Yes and no. And to link to this, I also think it's demographic driven. So my main interest is the capital markets. So I'm very interested in equities and bonds in the local market. I believe that there are untapped niches, especially in the equity market, that are not being explored by the local investor. Why is this? Because the local investor base is predominantly of an older demographic. It seems as though we are not reaching younger people when it comes to local investing. And I think that is a big stumbling block in terms of our capital markets issuing and going for green bonds and green investments and green equities. Hopefully will revive the equity market too.
But it's also the case that the people who are young today, in a few years' time, they'll be the ones with the purchasing power. So that goes again, I go back to my point of being prepared for what's coming. And we're not looking at, 50 years' time. We're looking at a five-year timeline, I believe.
And sort of there's this concept of the carbon footprint that kind of people maybe heard about it, are aware of it, maybe don't know how to really calculate it or see how it works. But I think carbon footprint is something in people's mind that they consider. Are we linking the fact that my buying decisions can influence my carbon footprint? And from a company's point of view, when they come to report ESG principles, the fact that they are issuing instruments or the fact that they are attracting greener investment, is that something that they have to report on? Is it something that is affecting their ESG rating or scoring?
Okay, so first of all, not every company has to report, okay? So it's only the larger companies or the listed companies. Those are the only ones who have to report their ESG performance, if you like. Having said that, we're still seeing smaller companies who are voluntarily reporting. Why? Because there are stakeholders that they deal with, whether it's the bank or their clients or potential employees. They want to know what that company is doing in terms of its impact on people and planet. So that's the first thing. When it comes to carbon footprint, yes, that's definitely one of the criteria that we measure. And this year I actually educated myself as well on how to do this. So it feels really complicated in the beginning, but it's really not. I mean, we have the numbers, we have the data, and we have the tools. So it's a matter of inputting this data into various online tools that exist. In a nutshell, we look at our energy consumption, we look at our fuel consumption for our transport needs, and also some habits like our travel habits, our eating habits, because those also relate to the carbon that we generate. And all these different numbers are calculated together to give us our carbon footprint, essentially. So just as we measure the carbon footprint of a small business, we can also measure our personal carbon. Obviously, it's not always, precise, but it gives us an indication. Yes.
I mean, something I'm also familiar with, or I like to discuss, as people probably know, is crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a sort of investment as well that we've seen in Europe really shooting up, and really volume is increasing, especially when it comes to green projects. So from solar farms to wind farms to sustainable waste management, water management. And people are actually developing platforms, developing projects, because they know that people are specifically looking for this type of investment. Would you say the local investor, given the choice, if there's more awareness, more issues related to these type of projects, let's say the development of a solar farm or a wind farm? We've seen recently there was the news that Malta would be investing in wind farms. Do you think that if these were issued as, again, let's say a bond or some sort of investment, that investors can jump in and help finance this, do you think they'll be received well from the public?
I always believe that in order to affect global change, we first need to look at ourselves. So not the macro, but the micro, our individual actions. So, for example, what Roberta was discussing was the direct carbon footprint impact that we have. For instance, if I came here with a car, then that is more directly relatable to me. And so I actually came here by bus to reduce my carbon footprint. So that is one. Secondly, on the macro front, or rather on the micro front, we're seeing this on a smaller scale when it comes to, for example, it's someone's birthday and they want to raise money for cancer awareness or some other philanthropical cause, and it happens, and people raise, thousands of euros because it is a cause that is directly relatable to them. Now, if we can somehow find a way of resonating with the people on these causes on an emotional level, then I believe that crowdfunding will definitely be a success, and it has the potential of there's actually a word for it, disaggregation of pooling of risk. So if you invest, say, 100 euros only in this crowdfunded project, you can, generate through your own little capital a massive project for someone's benefit, and at the same time generate a return for you, and also invest in other products rather than, for example, putting all your money, we were talking about property before, putting all your money in a property, having to deposit, having to take on debt, and locking in all your capital into one project.
And property is also crowding out people. You need to have a big chunk of investment to be able to even start it in the property ladder. So
I may just jump in, sorry. But I think you said something really important. We need to find a way that resonates. So it's all about communication, I think. As with everything else, if we're putting a product onto the market and the people out there are not understanding it, they're not going to take it up. So it's really
even
a matter of
exactly
communicating why this benefits them, perhaps from a financial point of view, but also from a personal point of view, the level of satisfaction that people can get in return.
Thanks, Roberta, for that. And I think this discussion can keep going, and it's very interesting to see the reaction of people, and also how we can continue attaching the effect of education and awareness from both sides, the investors and also the issuers, and creating more mechanisms to be able to work with this. Just as a final, easy personal opinion, I just wanted to ask you to perhaps give me an example that if you had a magic button that upon pressing it, one sustainable measure gets implemented instantly, quite universally, let's say in Malta or even worldwide. What's that one thing you would love to change instantly? Patrick?
So my dream is to be able to walk in a Maltese street without risking being run over. So I actually came here by bus, and it was a great journey, but we have such a beautiful country. If only we pedestrianized more, put in more trees, we gave space, and at the moment we have such wasted real estate space and cars being parked and cars polluting. Sure. Pedestrianize, fill the streets with trees, and let traffic go around, and use public transport.
Thank you. Roberta?
So mine will actually help Patrick achieve his, and it's been done already. Incentivize home working. So it's quick, it's easy, it's been done before, it's good from an environmental point of view, it's good from a social point of view, and I think that, I don't know why we haven't done it already.
Well, we can submit these proposals for the 2050 strategy vision of Malta, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you again, Roberta, Patrick, for this discussion. I hope the people out there enjoyed it as much as I did. I'd like to ask everyone to continue following the JA Malta social media, where we give content, information on what's happening on topics related also to financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship. And I thank Finance Malta for supporting this initiative, and I hope you join us in the next episode.